And some could be grouped together. I would be a little concerned about public awareness. If somebody either is in town or out of town, if they come in, if they had some idea, or if we had some way of communicating what we're trying to do with these, that they're artwork, they're like a mural, they're for interest to draw people into the community. I'm not sure how you'd go about doing that, especially for people that are not local, but if there's some way that, you know, people have an understanding, because they're going to be a real novelty in the beginning, or I would assume they would be. What else here? The recreation sign, when I was looking, you know, at the vault or that building, I was looking at the recreation sign. That's a big sign. I don't know whether there's any possibility. That's going to get torn down someday, and I don't know whether that sign would be available, you know, to move. But then in looking at that, across the top of that building would be a perfect place for it. It's about the right size. So, you know, any thinking that you could think in advance, I would think would be a good idea. Anyway, those were some thoughts I had on it.
Following along with Doug's comments, this sign is not relevant to the time or the location in historic The Dalles. I spot checked city directories. Historically, Sears Roebuck is not in The Dalles. And so there's, I hate to see us do something that will dilute our actual history that we have tried so hard to preserve and to develop and to build on. And I just have a problem with this. And like Doug says, if there's a way that they can be put up so that it is an art wall or something of the sort, to make it very clear that this is not part of historic The Dalles, even though it is in our historic district, because it has nothing to do with our history. It's art. But people will see it as history. This is my problem. You drive into Portland and you see the Oregon sign and you see this and that, and you know, oh, that used to be there. And that's not the case with this sign, and I don't know what the other signs are that are in the offing as far as being put up. So that's just, I'm not against it, I'm concerned. Because I am a historian, and I'm, Doug?
I think that's why it's relevant that the philosophy behind it is explained. Because again, if it's like a mural and a piece of artwork, to me it wouldn't make any difference where the sign was from in the country.
Yeah.
Because it's an individual piece just representing itself as a piece of artwork.
Or a piece of Americana, which
Yes.
Sears and Roebuck.
Yeah.
So we are part of the United States, and the Dalles is, you know, by having it here, it preserves it for history for time to come, and that's why I think it's important.
Yeah.
You answered the question of how many, and more to come after this one, right?
Correct. Yes.
So I would just say Americana would answer that question. Also, the plaque, I heard that there would be a plaque that would explain what the sign was about. And also on that sign, it would be on there. Probably that it's part of our grant process, could be a small disclaimer saying there is no actual, well, we do have a Sears, but it's different. It's not historic. So it wouldn't imply that there's a Sears store somewhere in the Commodore. Yeah.
May I add to that also? I love the idea of the Dalles becoming, you know, kind of tying it all together, like 1850s to the 1950s. Come and see it all, and have it all together. Get people excited about going up to Fort Cowles Museum. Tie everything in with the Walton Drug right down at First in Washington. My goodness, that building's been there since 1863. I think it's a lovely idea, and I think that the overarching goal of bringing people to the Dalles and being excited about history is more important to me per se, but I completely understand your reservations. But I think that people who came here, because of the loving way that we would preserve and display these things, that they really represented well and appropriately. So that's what.
I just had a thought from kind of answering to all of your questions or comments here, is maybe what we can do is you can direct staff to work with the language that's going to be going on that plaque so that it will call out where it originally came from, but maybe there's a little blurb about Sears Roebuck came to the Dalles in 1952 or whatever year, and the original one was located here. So it shows what the sign is, the location it originally came from, when and what relation that Sears Roebuck has to our community and what year it finally came to the Dalles. I don't know, would that
Yeah,
maybe?
Sears is an example of somebody that did come to the Dalles later, and it wasn't in the 50s, it was quite a while after that.
Oh, it was even later.
Yeah. Anyway, but I would venture to guess that some of the signs are going to be for things that were never in the Dalles.
Correct.
May I try to get back on focus here? I believe that we're having a discussion here now that we will have when the public hearing is closed. And I believe that it's time now, if you're done, Jeremy, to telling us why we should have it. If there's anyone in the crowd audience that would like to step forward and from the public.
May I have a couple more questions?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Bill, would they be visible from the freeway?
Uh,
Would they be lit at night, visible from people driving past the house?
That is the plan. Our plan is to have them illuminated for about 8 to 10 hours a day, just to save on the electricity costs for the property owner. And correct. And so one of the things that we're looking at for the other placement of the signs is the visibility from the freeway. For this initial one, we're looking at visibility from the Neon Sign Museum, having it, as you step out, there it is right there. Yeah, correct.
Now, are the historic signs exempt from our local ordinance? Any sign ordinance that we would encounter that might be?
So the only thing is it would either follow a sign, which would be a good or sales product that is being sold there. And then like we'd explained before, not before this meeting, we'd be looking at it as a mural. So it's actually a piece of art more so than a sign. Right. It would still need to meet the construction standards and be erected correctly as well as electrical permits. Mhm.
And one more quick
Yep, no, you're good.
Okay, just so excited about this. This is very, very, very cool. Why did you decide against running out on the other side? Are you going to enhance the alley to the Dalles? Because you don't really architecture and
Well, one of the things that we had talked about was we didn't want people just to be able to view the sign as they were just driving down 3rd Street, and say, oh, there's the sign and call it good. We really want to encourage people to walk around downtown. We also chose this side of the building because of the lack of, sort of stylings and the rest of the building. It's kind of a blank wall, and it sort of just kind of asks to have something on there. And what's so interesting about this one is that the Commodore is a Chicago-style architecture it was built in 1910, and that's the same era that this sign was built. And actually, it was hung in Chicago at Sears and Roebuck in Chicago around that same time.
Their headquarters?
I do believe so. So what's interesting? So that's why it's so aesthetically it works so well. In my opinion, of course. So yeah.
Thank you. This part of the hearing is to hear from you, and then we're also supposed to hear from the public. And now, if there's anyone in the public that wants to step forward, identify yourself and tell us why you don't necessarily agree with where this is at, I'd like to hear from you now. Okay, I guess the only ones that we're not too pleased is the commission.
Oh, my gosh.
We'll accept that. Oh, come on, there we go. Please identify yourself.
Carolyn Wood at 1709 Liberty Way, The Dalles. The thing that I think is important, that in the process of doing the tours or publicity or creating a brochure, that you explain the context of why it is here, and I think that would help. I also raised the questions that Sandy raised about historical content, but I think that by doing the publicity, or however we do it nowadays, online or in print, that you explain why and how come these signs were chosen and what they do, as you have discussed. So that would be my opinion.
Thank you. Anyone else that want to offer us anything at this point? Well, we're back to you, sir. You're supposed to counteract anything that might have not set well with you.
So in terms of being able to identify why the signs are here, as some of you know, Main Street does have 3 informational kiosks around town, featuring a map on one side and then history on the other. It would be interesting, I think, if we were to update those kiosks, maybe with information that's relevant to these signs. When I walk downtown and I see people from the cruise ships, I often see them reading from those kiosks, getting information as to whether it be a placement of a business or just reading about the history of the Dalles. And I think that that would be a great place to start in order to tell them, you know, what's the purpose behind these signs and why they're here.
Thank you. No one else got any comment here? I'm going to close the public hearing, and now we're going to go back to discussing this amongst the commission members. Now, we can discuss more, and we can ask questions to him. He'll give us anything we got to.
No, I think that, as I said earlier, on top of Doug's comments, if this is explained as an art installation, and it's very clear that, no, there isn't a Sears Roebuck store in the Commodore building, and I do know that the headquarters for Sears was in Chicago, and you know, if this is actually a sign that came from there, that's cool in terms of Americana. And, but we just want to be real sure that that's how we handle it and how Main Street handles it.
Got any more comments here, Doug? I want to ask a question that I probably should have asked while the man was here. A neon sign is only good if it's lit. How long will this be lit on an average day?
So Jeremiah did state that he was going to be doing it basically from dusk till dawn is kind of, I mean, they're going to be doing it for a period of time to save on energy. So it's not going to be up and lit all day long. It'll just be in the evening hours.
But would at night it be up lit?
Correct.
I'm trying to think whose window we're going to be shining that light in. But
Well, you know, that, I wondered about that too, because of the move to create apartments in the top stories of some of the downtown buildings. Of course, I guess you just pull your blinds, right?
and if we do progress with this program, and I'm still open, I could see with 6 or 8 neon signs all lit up at one time on that wall would kind of create a light problem.
Well, it's like the light show on Grand Coulee Dam.
Okay.
Probably
Smaller scale.
without the strobe.
Smaller scale.
Well, if they were a problem, I would think instead of keeping them on till 11, you could turn them off at 10. You know, I think if you can control the time they're on. And if you look at that sign, it's not lit right now, but to me, it's still an interesting sign. I don't
Yeah.
think that the interest level is, it's connected to lighting, but they're still interesting, even if they're not lit
Right.
during the day.
And the painted signs that are on the top of some of the buildings on 2nd and 3rd Street, they're You know, they're definitely not lit, but they're very obvious.
Well, if we have no further discussion, we can float a motion.
I make a motion that we approve the, I don't have the, whatever it is, what's the number on it?
HLC 160-18
Thank you. I make a motion, we approve that number.
with the conditions of approval stated? So with the 4 conditions of approval?
Yes.
Okay, based upon findings of fact.
Did my hearing fail me completely? I'm still waiting for a second?
I'll second.
Didn't fail completely. All right, the motion has been made and seconded. If there's no further discussion, I would say all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed would say same sign. I have to vote, I understand, so I'll have to put an aye in also. So the motion has been carried. Do you want to, staff, should we go to the resolution now or go to the resolution?
Nope, let's go ahead and go to the next public hearing since that we have the hearing. So I do actually have the city attorney is going to come in to hear Doug's ex parte contact. Gene should be here any second, so just want to have him hear Gene's, or
He's on
Doug's,
his way.
Doug's concerns. Okay, so go ahead, Bob, and you can ask the ex parte question again for the second application.
Okay,
Wait,
that's what I wanted to know. We'll get the resolution.
Bob?
Oh, I didn't read the title. I was looking for it too. Okay, the motion was made to pass. Where is it? Oh, pardon me, okay. I was thinking you wanted the title for that last motion that was passed. Okay, I'll find it. Give me a chance. Okay. We will get to that right now. Okay. Public hearing is open. It's going to open up here in a minute as soon as I get my act together for the application. Where is the number of that?
151.
Go to the front page, the,
161,
I'll go back to the agenda. I'll go back to the agenda. That's Safeway.
there you go.
161 and
Yeah,
150.
161-18, Todd Carpenter, and this is, relates to the East Second Street office for the Bank Hotel building. That is what you wanted, Paula? All right, we have a question now of a conflict of interest,
ex parte contact.
whether you make an
Well,
impartial decision. All right, go ahead.
my son at one time owned that building, and then he sold it. And so neither he nor I have any personal connection with it at this time. Now, whether that prior ownership excludes me from the discussion is the question, I guess.
I think in terms of a potential conflict, if the fact that Michael has sold the business, if there's not going to be any potential for any personal financial benefit to either, I guess, Michael or yourself as a result of this decision, and I don't quite see how this was, because I understand right, this is involving exterior work for the building and really doesn't, other than the process going ahead, but I believe that transaction's already pretty much accomplished, isn't it? It's been completed, the purchase has been done.
Yes.
So I don't see how this decision would result in any more financial benefit to Mr. Belish, or actually Ms. Harris. I think it's the person who's the property owner, if I remember correctly. So I don't see any potential financial benefit to you personally
No, there
from
wouldn't
that.
be.
So that could be, I mean, that would be one conflict that might have to disclose. The other is perhaps your impartiality, the fact of that connection, but again, since that transaction is closed, unless you felt that that would somehow bias you against Mr. Carpenter or not allow you to be impartial, then, but it doesn't, I don't, sounds like if that transaction is closed and there's nothing about that that would affect your thoughts on this particular application or prejudice you, I don't see a conflict. It would just be if you felt you couldn't be impartial and wanted to excuse yourself.
My interest is just that the building looks nice,
Okay.
like all the rest of the buildings in the Dells. So
It doesn't
I
sound like
don't
it's
see
a
any
conflict.
conflict,
Yeah,
but I
don't think
brought
it's-
it up just,
Well, that's a
because
good
Bob
point to make
mentioned
sure,
it.
but it sounds like it would not be any sort of financial benefit. And in terms of your impartiality, it sounds again like you haven't really discussed this with the applicant outside of it. You haven't been biased or at this point.
I just have positive statements to make.
Okay. Well, that sounds like you're okay.
Thank you.
If I may ask at this point, the commission takes your word, we don't have to have a vote amongst us or anything? We take the advice of council?
That's right. It's if any member of the commission or the audience wanted to challenge Mr. Leash, I guess they could now make that point. If there was a concern among the other commissioners or anyone in the audience, if they felt Mr. Leash still may not be impartial, they could raise that challenge, and then the commission would make that decision.
I would ask that that be asked of the audience, that if anyone feels that Doug cannot make an impartial decision.
Thank you, Tim. Is there anyone that has listened to this discussion that wants to challenge this? If they would they please do this? We're going to say that, thank you, Gene. You answered the question. Now I'll get organized. Now, you got it on the board over there. All I got to do is read the board. Public hearing for HLC 161-18 is for the 205 to 209 East 2nd Street. The bank building is open for the
Staff
proponent.
report. Okay, all
Oh, the
righty.
staff report. We
Would
better
you
get
like,
a
would you
staff
like the
report.
staff report?
Yes, please.
Thank you, thank you, Vice Chair McNary. So as you stated, the applicant is actually Todd Carpenter. He's applying to restore the East 2nd Street facade as well as the back facade. Well, there's actually a door, window in the back of the historic Bank Hotel. The project will include installation of a large window that will face the rear alley also. Property is located at 205 and 209 East 2nd Street. It is located in the CBC 1 district, which is our National Historic District, as well as it is classified similarly to the previous application as a secondary resource in the Dells Commercial Historic District. Property owners within 100 feet were notified, as well as the State Historic Preservation Office. And as of the date that the staff report was written, we did not receive any comments. Staff's recommendation is approval with conditions based upon findings of fact. The Bank Hotel was built circa 1926 and is classified as a secondary resource. The building style is 19th century commercial with alterations that were made on the south elevation, doors, and windows. Oh, and I didn't put the old groovy photo in here. I'm sorry, Todd, I didn't include the brick. Okay, I think the commission actually has it. Maybe on purpose, I don't know. So the applicant is proposing to remove the facade that was added in the 1960s and 70s, and if you all have looked at your photos in the packet, it screams 60s, 70s. They're going to be, I'm sorry, was that bad? That's not a bad thing. And they'll be replacing it with compatible doors and windows. The project will also include cleaning of existing fixtures, restoring the original transom windows, which are actually there, adding a new steel awning, which will be similarly styled to what you see on the Commodore, as well as removal of the orange brick and the yellow marquee, which pops out from the building, and highlight the vault entry architecture features, which is going to be this right here, which is just great. In terms of, I want to actually jump again to section B, which is dealing with the materials for the commercial front and the historic design guidelines. So page 4 of 6 deals with the commercial front and the requirements, talking about primary entrances being recessed, tiled floors being highly effective in marking a recessed entry, use of large clear plate glass for display windows, use of vertical double-hung windows, window bulkheads, identifying remaining fragments of an earlier window system, as well as use of historic photos for reference is recommended. The primary entrance will remain on the front of the building, and the entire front will be slightly recessed. And we actually can see it a little bit on this photo here. It's not the greatest, but you can see that it actually is recessed right there. Those actually are showing the doors opening. No information was provided in regards to a recessed area flooring. So our guidelines do suggest, again, it doesn't require that they do some sort of tile to make it at least be seen. In terms of the clear glass plate display, as was shown, we do have two options here. So this is option 2 and option 1. So in option 2, you'll see the windowed panes that are going here on the windows, and this is more like a roll-up door system versus, whoops, the opened doors, which are more like a French door opening is what is shown for option 1. So both options show clear plate glass for the windows. However, option 2 obviously shows the muttons as well as the multiple lights. Criteria is met for option 1, but option 2, it does not appear to meet the criteria for the design guidelines. The upper floor windows are going to remain the existing windows, so there's no changes at this time. Both options to not include window bulkheads, which are recommended and historically accurate. Staff is actually recommending that the plans be modified to include bulkheads to be consistent with other similarly aged buildings in that historic district. So I actually put that criterion could be addressed as a condition of approval. And then in terms of keeping any original materials, unfortunately, a majority of the original facade has been removed on the first floor. But the transit windows do exist and they will be restored, as well as the storefront cornice and masonry piers, which is this cool part right here. Staff was able to locate a few historic photos, and those were actually used as reference for the staff report. We actually found one that was dealing predominantly with this portion of the building, and it was a shorter building. So we found some old photos that were actually, Claudia Leach had a cool old photo, but nothing of what this actually looked like in its heyday. In terms of materials, so we didn't get any material lists. However, it does detail in the notes talking about the materials meeting those guidelines. So they're proposing to restore original materials that remain on the building, so those will remain, and then any non-historic alterations will actually be removed, which is the brick and the windows and marquee. Also, the proposed materials will be wood, glass, and steel, and they appear to be compatible with the historic materials that exist on the building, as well as the building type. And the doors and windows will have an exterior wood finish, and this will be also required to meet Oregon State building codes. So that's where we kind of run into a little bit of a gray area. Sometimes building codes, even though we want it for historic, if there's a certain percentage of modification to a historic building, that our historic guidelines sometimes don't trump fire life safety. So we will work with the applicant and with building codes when necessary to ensure that it's something that's aesthetically pleasing and meets our guidelines as best as possible, but sometimes they do have additional regulations or requirements at building codes. The application does not include reflective or smoke glass, and that is prohibited. And there is actually no painting of the brick that is planned, as well as cleaning of the building is planned. So I did include a condition of approval that states that no sandblasting will be permitted. And at this time, they have not provided any information regarding colors of windows or painting. Staff suggests that the commission allow staff to make a determination if the colors meet design guidelines, and I did add that as a condition of approval. The conclusion of this application is that the proposed improvements to the windows, doors, and new awning will bring the building more in compliance with the historic design guidelines. The restoration will complement the building and enhance the commercial street facade. These changes to the building will allow for continued use of the historic landmark. In all respects, this application meets the standards of Secretary of Interior and the City of the Dalles, General Ordinance 94-1194, as well as General Ordinance 96-1206, and I gave 10 conditions of approval. The 10 conditions of approval include work will be completed in substantial conformance to the pictures and proposals as submitted and reviewed and modified for option number 1. That is staff's recommendation. Number 2 is window bulkheads will be required to be added to the door windows. on option 1. Number 3, the use for wood for windows is recommended. Number 4, the use of reflective and smoke glass is prohibited. Number 5, wherever possible, the natural color of the materials should be retained. Number 6, the modification to the facade shall not alter the essential form and integrity of the historic property. Utmost care will be taken with the construction of any new facade and the installation of the awning. Number 7, the applicants will need to submit plans for the building permit to the State Building Codes Department. Number 8, cleaning of the historic structure requires that the applicants use the gentlest means possible. No harsh chemicals or sandblasting will be allowed. Number 9, painting will be required to follow historic design guidelines and be approved by city planning staff prior to the work starting. And number 10, the applicants are required to notify the planning department of any alteration to the approved plans. Do you have any questions of staff? That is the back side of the building. I didn't really go over in detail with you on that. So this is the actual back door. They're going to be keeping this area here. This is actually a stairwell that goes down, and then they'll be replacing this with a new opening here. So any questions?
Any questions from the staff before we call the proponent to speak?
I had a couple of questions for whoever's going to answer to the design. Do
Yeah,
we do
okay,
that
well,
now, or?
I'll call for him to come present his program. I believe I'm going to call for Mr. Todd.
I have a quick question. Will the upper floors include plans for the future to include the possibility of vertical housing needs in the Dalles?
I think that's something that Mr. Carpenter could explain. I'm not sure if he's ready to answer that question, but go ahead and have him come on up.
Todd Carpenter, 216 East Fifth Street, Dalles, Oregon, 97058. And I can't answer all those questions. So I can take option 2 off the table because I think our team has already decided that we don't want option 2, so that's great. Option 1 will be fine. I do want to point out a couple things that we didn't talk about. The blade signs I just want to make sure that that's included in the proposal.
So signs are reviewed as a separate, so I didn't include in the staff report, and I guess I forgot to mention that to you. So yeah, we will review that.
That'll be separate.
It looks,
Another meeting though?
yeah, nope, no meeting. It's just
okay.
actually staff, correct.
And then the backside is actually a roll-up door. So the backside will be a metal, aluminum, bronzed door that will look like wood, but it'll be a roll-up door for that back part. The front material is going to be wood. It'll be custom-made wood. It'll be painted, and we'll use those design standards. That'll be fine. And then I think to answer your question,
My question.
I do have a phase 2 plan that actually, Susan actually started all these plans. I'm just kind of taking the ball and running with it. So phase 2 will be, we want to restore the hotel to some type of McMiniman style hotel. So part of it will be suites and part of it will be community bathroom type rooms. And we think we can, there was, originally there was 18 rooms up there, but because we'll have to do some fire code stuff and some egress and things like that, we're going to lose a couple rooms. But it'll be probably around 15 to 16 units on the top 2 floors.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's phase 2 plan. Phase 1, we're just focusing on the main level being family friendly, opening up that. You guys didn't really talk about this, but we're opening up this second floor mezzanine area. So it'll be 16-foot ceilings. Lottery will be hidden. It'll be family friendly all the time. It'll be a little more upscale restaurant than is there right now. So, and then it'll have a large bar, which will move into the other side, to the other side of the room. So those are the broad brush strokes.
So I had just a couple questions. Well, in one observation, I guess I'll start with that. On the far side, on the right-hand side, the building next door, which is not as old as the one you're working on, there's an overlap about this big of tile. And are you going to try to take that off?
So I'm in process with the city on the rec building. We met on Monday, and I need to sign some things, but we're going to be doing a disposition property and working towards an agreement for that. And so I have some plans for that as well, to sort of incorporate, you know, well, I'll be back in front of
Yeah,
the historical
yeah,
committee,
we'll be
or
back.
landmark committee to talk about that. But I'd like to, you know, hear your comments about that, what you guys want to do, or what you're open to as far as maybe restoring it to the early 1900s, three separate storefronts basically in there, and removing that 1970s style. Actually, somebody mentioned the recreation sign. Actually had talked to a couple people about maybe taking that and moving it to the backside of the top of the building, and so it's facing the, you know, so it's facing the highway and lighted up. I think that'd be kind of neat. So I've got some ideas on that.
So let's try to not talk too much about that, because just to be safe.
Phase one, I'm not sure how we're going to address that little eve. We'll probably leave it to start with, and then we'll have to figure something out with that.
I was just thinking that, you know, if you're in a process of redoing the front of the building, and that other building is going to get torn down at one time, if you could just cut down along there and peel off those tiles, and then it would be cleaned up and you wouldn't have to worry about it in the future,
Yeah,
was one idea.
it's brick. It's definitely brick underneath. So I don't think we can do that.
I would assume they just went over the original brick on the hotel.
So it looks like
You're talking about that.
Yes, that little piece down there. The existing archway over where the entryway will be, it's two different colors now. Is there, you know, and Dawn had said that you can't sandblast, and you have to use caution with materials you use. Have you figured out any way to get that paint off?
I haven't talked to anybody about that yet. It's going to be, when I get the architectural drawings done mid-August, I'll be talking to contractors about the front of the building and figuring out how we're going to do all that.
Yeah.
We want it, the color scheme is about right. I'm hoping that we can figure out a way to get the natural color of that stone back, is what I'm hoping.
Yeah, hopefully that would be the case. You said that you would use the existing transom windows. Right now, those are just one pane of glass, so I'm assuming you're going to replace
We're
those.
going to use the existing transom space, but we're going to change out the windows. We're
Yeah.
trading windows.
I just was down today looking across, and the upper windows look like they're in kind of bad shape, but hopefully you're just planning on painting to restore them at this time.
At this point, yeah. That'll be
Yeah.
phase two. We'll probably try to look at replacing those as well.
On somewhere over towards the middle and the right-hand side, they painted partway up with a tannish paint,
Yep.
and there's a yellow spot on that side too. Again, if there was some way to return that to the brick color that's up above, the original color would be good.
That's what I'd like to do.
Of course, we realize that you're limited as far as the materials you can use to get that paint off. So, but it's too bad somebody painted it at one time in the past. Okay, I talked about that already. Well, those were just some thoughts.
Yeah, great.
Anyone else here got question to ask of Mr. Carpenter?
I would tell you that we have, I volunteer at the Discovery Center Library, and we have the original historic landmark plans out there, including all of Sally's original notes. And sometimes there are more notes and more materials than show up in the actual official landmarks book. So you're welcome to come out there and look.
That'd be great. I'll do that.
So Sally is who actually wrote our historic district papers. So she did a lot of research. She provided all those research papers out to the Discovery Center.
I
It's
did
great.
a lot of research up at the.
Oh, it's your old, yeah, yeah.
I didn't go to the.
One-
Go ahead.
One other thing, you had two proposals as far as the windows below, the French doors and then the roll-up doors. I think the French doors are more in keeping architecturally with the building. And if you look at the windows, one of my rationales is when you look at the windows up above, they're just a plain piece of glass. When you look at the transom, they're broken up, which makes a nice texture across there. And then below, you go back to the style that's up above. But if the bottom is the same as the transom windows, to me, it looks very busy. So I would
Yeah.
suggest that you go with those, what you've got up there now.
We like option one too, so it sounds like
Yeah.
that fits with.
Design guidelines.
Yeah, I agree with the staff report on option one.
If there's no one got any further questions at this point from Mr. Carpenter, I would like to call anyone that would like to testify against this project.
Well, do we want to see if there's anyone else that wants to speak for it?
Pardon?
Thank you. Is there
Thank
anybody?
you. You'll be back.
Is there,
Don't go very far.
okay.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to have something to say against what we're talking about here? Get brave.
No. His wife does not count.
I can see a little movement, but I don't hear much. If hearing none, Mr. Carpenter, do you have anything further to say before we close the public hearing?
No, just thank you for the time, appreciate it. And I will be back, so.
Yay.
At this point, we'll close the public hearing and discuss amongst the commission. Now, we're gonna ask all the questions we want.
Well, I think that it's amazing looking at this picture compared to what I looked at this afternoon downtown. And as Bob and I were discussing earlier that, historically, that building was a dive when I moved to the Dalles in the 60s, and
Oh, wow.
it hasn't been too much since then. And just to have a really nice restaurant and saloon is going to be, yeah.
I have been concerned for many years, well, not too many years. I see in the 2016 picture. But sometime or another, they had a very interesting to me historically, outside fire escapes that were removed from that building. And they gave the character and the age of that building very clearly when they were up there. And I was brokenhearted one day when I looked down there and they'd been removed. I don't suppose they'll ever be required again if they put residency in the upstairs.
So my conversations with the State Historic Preservation Office is that they are actually encouraged those to be removed, especially from fronts of building, and looking for alterations to be done inside the building and an egress to be at a different location. So probably not. And Curry Gill told me to tell you she's sorry, but she agreed with, I wouldn't say me, but with the removal of the sign. I did tell her you were upset about it. She said, those are things that are, they're all going away. So and I think that obviously it still wouldn't work because it would have to be full-blown re-engineered. So it sounds like other jurisdictions have similar type of fire escapes or old fire escapes.
This is, again, more in the line of an aside, but there are some really interesting stories about the houses or the apartments at ground level from the alley. And historically, that if there were local blacks or Chinese or railroad workers, that's where they lived. And sometimes you have an address that says 2nd Street, but then there's a 1/2 tack to it. And in a more further down the road, the half is the 2nd floor. But in that area, the half is around at ground level in the back. And so if you choose to do some historic placards or anything, we can help you with that too.
I just am a little bit confused on the two parts of this project. The front office I can see is a very beautiful addition. The large window that is described in the application is a questionable one to me, because I remember we had a lengthy discussion at the time they built the deck, and I can't possibly remember why we discussed it for great length. Something that was not in balance, but I can't remember what it was then, but we had to approve the building of that deck, and I can't
We
remember how
did.
long ago that was.
It's been probably 10-plus years ago. It was quite some time ago.
It was
you
before
remember?
I came on.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been, I think Dennis may have been. Do you recall? No.
Maybe I'm the only one that made it.
You
so
are. It
long.
would have been you and Eric, so sorry, Bob. I don't remember. Case Limroth was the contractor, and Case has been out of town for quite a few years, so.
What are we doing by putting that larger window in there? We're consolidating several windows?
So it's actually a large door in the back, so we may need to open up the public hearing again so that he can answer a little bit more to that, because I don't have all of the answers to what is existing on that facade there. You want to open the public hearing up again so Mr. Carpenter can answer?
Yes, because I didn't really hear the man talking too
About the back?
strongly about the back, other than gonna put in something, but.
Okay, so you need to open it back up
Yeah,
again.
but-
Okay.
but May we open the public hearing again? Are you back?
Do I need to
I
say
told
my
you you'd be back
No, you're
quickly.
good, you're good.
So, right now, there's a blocked out, I think it's a grain door that exists right here in the back. It's not part of the brick side, it's an actual wood where they've taken it and they've blocked it off. So it exists back there, it's kind of ugly, it doesn't really match the building. The deck comes to about here, right in the middle of it. What we're doing is we're gonna extend the deck so that it evens out the building, so it looks better on the backside. Extend it, and then we're gonna put that roll-up door in there so that we can have outside dining on the deck and access from the inside. So on nice nights, we'll be able to roll that thing up and we'll be able to serve people. We'll get an extra, 30 people or 35 people on that deck area for dining on, the nice Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights or whatever we have.
And we have an awning over it also.
Correct.
Yeah, so, I don't know what's allowed down here, I've heard some different things. We drew in similar to the front, we drew in a steel awning. But if we need to do sales or whatever we need to do, I'll work with the city on what is allowed for that awning, but we will do an awning on the top.
So it's an actual awning, not a pergola or,
Yeah, right now it's shown as a steel awning, just like the front. But if the city won't allow that, then I'll do, what they did out from Clock Tower, which is the sales
So, he could do either. Obviously, if you have a suggestion, that'd probably be a good time to let him know that.
Yeah, we do, first choice would be to kind of match the front of the building, but that may not be possible with the city.
A pergola might even look kind of nice back there, too.
I'm through.
Good? You all good? Now we can close the public hearing again for the second time? Okay. Public hearing is reclosed. Okay, now any further discussion?
Well, I would just like to say that I think it's a wonderful project to clean that up. One of the things I like about it too is that our sidewalks are very narrow, and you're going to make it so you can open it and give more definition to the front, which I think is a great idea. I'm hopefully you can clean up the paint and stuff that people have put on it. I think it's a great idea, and I like the design.
I second it.
Well, if we're in this close to agreement, maybe someone would make a motion that we approve.
I'm ecstatic. Where have you been for the last 10, 15 years? All right.
Easier now.
Yes, that's important.
Are we ready?
I don't motion. I don't make motions, I kind of try to sheep burn them.
Well, I move that we accept the proposal 161-18 of the Bank Hotel Building proposal.
With,
Second.
We got a whole bunch of conditions here.
Okay,
with the 10
with the conditions that, that are in the staff report, including option number 1 for the doors on the front side. Did I do it
Yeah,
right that time?
You're getting the feel of this operation, I think you're gonna be all right.
You going to keep me?
Yeah, I think we'll get you.
Do I hear a second?
I will second it again.
All right, we've had a motion now to approve, I'll try to get this a little better for you, Paul. Application 16118 for the Banks Hotel Building. Is there any further discussion? If no further discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, say likewise, and I think it was unanimous. So, thank you. You can start building, sir, anytime.
No, wait.
Or,
yeah,
or
yeah,
unbuilding as,
We got a little bit of unromantic office work yet to do. We got resolutions that we have to pass, but they're not open for public. But we appreciate anyone that is sent here, spent the afternoon trying to figure out what I'm doing, and if they find out, tell me. So, all right. we
Thank
need
you. Congratulations. Yay. Yay. Yeah, no kidding.
thank you.
So I don't know if anybody, this is just a sidebar, I don't know if any of you, Todd actually did do some homework in his application, but I'd like to point out his historic archaeological resources at the site are Mrs. Mary Davis from the Dallas Historical Society. I giggled. I was like,
She wanted to correct that.
I
That was at home, and
I wondered, I thought, oh, Dennis is going to love this, so.
she did want to.
She's a
She is an archaeological resource.
Did do research for
She
Todd.
did.
I wondered if that was anything in relation to an
Nice tip
all
of the hat.
capital suite, that it seemed to be quite bold print.
It'll stay there
Yeah.
for hundreds of years.
I am so excited about this project. I think everybody
This
at
is
this
very
table
cool.
It's time.
Absolutely.
And I think we're right on the cusp of greatness. I know I've said that for many years with all of you, but it's time. And our downtown is.
I can
going
feel
to-
it in the air.
This isn't the only thing.
On the cusp
Oh, yeah.
of greatness?
Right.
Is that what you said?
Yes. But, I mean, and he did start talking about some more, and that's why I kind of shut him off, was because we do need to make sure, because he probably will be back to see you sooner than later.
Where is he from?
He is actually from the Portland area. And you may remember, he bought the Homer's Baker's old house.
Yes.
So we had actually reviewed
We did, they were in here.
to get rid of the door to
Wanted to
nowhere.
get rid of that door in
Yeah.
the
The
back.
door to
Put in a
nowhere.
window.
Okay, that's
Door,
who it
like,
was.
second floor.
Yes.
Familiar, but
I could,
And at that time, he had actually stated that he was looking at investing more in the Dalles. So I was very favorabally pleased when I heard he'd been working with Susan.
Who's funding all this?
I'm not sure.
Fascinating. Is it grants or does he have a sugar daddy?
I don't know. I don't know. Is that appropriate? Can we even ask?
I know that's what, I'm asking now.
So anyway, okay.
I can do that.
I think I found a new
Bob, rein us in.
best friend. He doesn't know it yet.
Rein us in, Bob.
we got a late start, let's stick on business for a
Let's get
minute,
it going.
and all go home.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Don.
I
Yes.
miss you guys.
Uh,
Hardly ever see you.
Let's attack resolution number 150-18, and that is for the application for the Sears and Roebuck sign. If someone would make a motion that we approve that resolution.
I move that we approve Historic Landmarks Resolution number 150-18 with the 4 conditions of approval that were listed.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor of passing resolution 15018, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we pass that unanimously. Now we'll flip the page and go to 151-18, And this is the application for the Old Banks Hotel. Thank you, Ruth. You're working on me, getting that listed right. I would entertain a motion to approve or disapprove.
I make a motion, we approve Resolution 1618-18.
151.
Oh,
151.
Change them
the
up.
number up above, 151-18, excuse me. The other was application number.
Yeah.
I move to,
With
oh,
all 10.
yeah, with all of the six,
Double 10.
um,
Gotta go to the next page.
oh, there's 10? The 10 recommendations?
He and I will make this right.
Teamwork.
Don't use up too many of our bodies. We don't have very many to spare. Thank you. Now we'll need a second.
I'll second.
There, we got team action. Any further discussion about this resolution? If hearing none, we'll say, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, but I think we had an unanimous vote there. Both of our resolutions are done. Now I can go back to the very front of my whole big program and look at our agenda. Staff and commission comments. Heather, good to see you. Got anything you want to tell us about what's going on?
Up at Fort Dow's Museum?
Anywhere in town.
Well,
Where
especially at
historically,
Fort
yeah.
Dow's Museum, it's been lovingly scrubbed gently, and at least one layer of preservatives, but three layers,
coats of
wow, have been applied, and it
They
looks
are
beautiful.
complete.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah,
I'm so happy. They did such a wonderful job. And the gentleman who did it, Steve Stroud, I would recommend him highly to anyone
He really
who has a need of this
obviously
nature.
seemed to care.
Yes, definitely. Good.
Good.
So, all around, life is good. How about you?
Tim, if you got something, I want to thank you for helping me when we needed a little procedural help. Thank you.
Welcome. I have nothing to add to this conversation.
Oh, but you're the man that's watching the historic things. We must be still thinking about our building across the rail.
I'm working on that.
Any comments that we, as the historic commission, can
Yeah,
go
it's
home
just-
with?
Taking a look at how it fits in, how it's preserved. I mean, there's a lot of variables, and there's still a lot of movement to remove it. So, you know, it's just gonna be a battle to be fought,
I would like to join you in that fight officially.
all right? I appreciate it, but I just feel that it's a part of our history that really,
Absolutely. There's
needs
so
to
many
be
reasons that
preserved.
building must be preserved.
Well,
And if it comes down to being out in front with your chained, I'll be there with you.
Oh.
He said he'd do it. And by golly,
I
I'm
wish we
with
had
you.
Pat May's old shirt.
But I don't think that's necessary.
we as a group will work better if we're all informed somewhat on the same level, and that's the reason I'm pulling this out of you. It seems like
you know, what happens is that there are opportunities that show themselves when you least expect it. I'm thrilled, but I'm also pleasantly surprised to see this gentleman interested in our community. If we can just get some more of these folks, you know, and that's,
Once
we
he's
can
successful, they'll come
we can
rolling in.
revitalize with the Tonys, with all the other things that are happening to our community. You're right, we're right on the cusp of something great. 2001 Space Odyssey. Something wonderful is going to happen,
The H&B on again.
and it is. It's a great city, we just have to keep it that way.
Agreed. You're here.
Mr. Davis, do you have anything that?
I have a question. The turquoise building.
My wife
That's been a topic a couple times today.
Yeah, well, my
Uh-oh, I
wife
think the meeting
had the
getting
inquiry.
longer.
She said, did Don approve this color?
I had a similar question.
So that building, believe it or not, is not in our National Historic District.
I made that assumption. by
Should-
the
should
looks
it
of the
be?
color and the-
Should it be, and should the ice house be? Absolutely. And we did
They
talk
just need to
about
be
that years ago with Sally about extending and getting, and ironically, when those districts were made, I believe the city of the Dalles may have been the owner of those buildings. So to me, I'm not sure why they weren't included originally. I could be wrong. So
Fascinating.
Anyway, the new owner, his name is Mr. Steve Light, and he's from Pendleton area, grew up in Pendleton, and worked East Coast for many years, and he wanted to get back into Oregon and back into this area. He's going to be investing heavily, or he has already invested heavily, similar to Mr. Carpenter, in our community, residential as well as commercial. Bought that building, wants to basically make it something like an incubator, starter business, provide spaces for people that are looking for certain spaces. At this time, he hasn't come through for any review in terms of use for us, but he does have a mural artist, and this guy, if you get a chance, I want to just take like half a day and go down there and watch. He is extremely talented. His name is Blaine.
His name's on the side of it.
Does he have it on there? Okay. It's almost lifelike. It's a very
And that's just a rough sketch.
artsy, different, definitely not anything that I would envision on that side of the building. It's definitely not historic. It falls under mural. Our code states that a mural can be put up on any building. It's an exempt, it can be historic or regular, so
So the side facing the freeway
will be a mural. Yes, he's actually going to be two-sided.
It is already.
I haven't,
You need to go look, it's amazing,
On the way home.
drive
I've
by,
only
it's,
seen the slime green color.
oh, no, it's like a
Neon.
teal.
It's like
a
an
nice
aqua blue.
teal, aqua blue.
Okay.
Yes, a turquoise
Okay.
color. It's in that
I called
turquoise
it
tone.
slime green.
No,
let's not
no.
go there.
I'm a little colorblind.
It's too late now, let's be happy.
So it's a really cool sign. It'll be an eye attractant, definitely from the freeway.
Right there.
But I will send you all a mock-up of what it's supposed to look like. But this guy, this artist, and I've always, which it may just because I'm an art teacher's kid, but I've loved looking at the art, and I've always felt it was tagging art when it's done well. And I'm just disappointed that those people that tag those sides of buildings and tag all of the railroad carts that go by, or the trains that go by, why don't they have another area that they can actually show that media and what talent they truly have? And that is basically what this artist has done, is he's doing, it's all shake, rattle can is how he does it.
I saw them working on it, it was really impressive.
He's got, well, and Paula was asking him when he came in, and she's like, how do you do it? He's like, oh, we have tips. So they have got special tips to do. I mean, it is so lifelike. So I will send you guys a picture of it, just
Okay.
Drive down
to
there.
kind of take a look. I mean, I was a little bit taken back when I was like, oh, wow.
That's why I
it's a
drove
little
down. I was
different.
like, what's going
I
on
guess
down
my
there?
question comes to, are there any regulations on what kind of a mural you can put on the side of a building?
Nope.
So we
Nothing.
could end up with
It's not under
a
our
naked lady
purview
that's
if it's not
40 feet
on the
wide.
Well, we do have regulations in regards to what is considered obscene, so we have to be careful in terms of what can't have foul words or obscenities.
In the eye of the beholder.
Well, and I think you might be right.
A naked lady on a building may draw passerbys into the Dalles.
Yeah, and we may have wrecks on 84.
I think that's maybe why a lot of people go to the Baldwin, or the food. No.
They do.
But, I mean,
Okay.
unfortunately, no, we don't really have any, or fortunately, I guess you could look at it either way.
Well-
The only thing that I could technically, he does have building identification, he calls it the hub, and that's what he wants to name his building. So he's limited in size for that. If it does go over a certain size, he just has to get a sign permit, that's $30 from me, so there's really no control. On another totally non-historic building on the other end of town, that actually has a grow site and a dispensary, there's 2 recent additions of marijuana leaves on, and we have no regulation to not allow that either. So, I mean, obviously, way different, but I've had people call me about that. The M Thrive building, it's the
Oh,
metal.
the kind of,
K&H, yeah, the old K&H Specialties out there. So I'm hoping it's going to be something that's an eye catcher, and I think it might also,
Oh, I don't doubt.
Well,
that
It already
turquoise.
is.
I have some closing comments.
Yes.
If Heather and Don is impressed, then I'm impressed. So,
It's interesting. And Paula, I mean,
I'm
if you,
waiting for my art teacher to say something.
oh, okay, well, yeah, but, yeah. But I will say, and you guys have heard me say this 100 times, I'm not a mural fan
You can see it from the
in
freeway.
terms of historic murals.
Yeah,
I just have never been.
Go
To
down-
me,
Drive down
it's
First
not
Street.
art. What he's doing is actually art.
Oh, okay.
That's my art cap versus my historic caps.
It's like a 140-foot long building.
I
don't
understand
know.
the distinction.
Yeah,
It's huge.
I haven't noticed.
Oh, Doug, you've got to go look at it.
Yeah,
I think,
On the way home, I'll go look at it.
Out of touch.
I think you need to call my dad, and you two need to make a visit and watch him, but don't let Dad talk to him. Just kind of stand there and watch him. I honestly think I'm going to make a trip down there, and I think everybody should make a field trip just to watch it. And
Yeah, we drove, Mary and I drove by today, because she
Amazing.
said, there's this turquoise building down there with something going up on it. Well, Russ
It's on
Brown,
one of the
I was
Facebook
working with
pages.
today, and he and Loyal were talking about this, wondering what was
What
going
is
to
it?
be.
What's going on?
Yeah.
So is
No, I
that
haven't seen you
behind
this
Tony's?
excited
Is
in
that?
40 years.
That one?
Oh my gosh,
Oh,
it was.
okay.
Back when he was
It was
teaching
all
me and
Great big-
blanketed with
grade school
visqueen
as
when
music
I.
teacher.
Yeah, no, it's
Is that
very
what it was
visible
from?
now.
Oh.
It's all outlined, you can see a great big
How
bird, and
delightful.
It was in
a
his
cougar,
wife's
and I don't know what.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, go look, yeah.
I will.
No,
So,
beautiful art, but
yeah.
I was questioning the.
So now for it to become into a historic landmark, that we might have some discussions about removal of that someday, but I don't want to go there.
No,
Let's just leave, I think he's going to preserve that building, and we're going to see some and I will say with that turquoise, we do actually see the architectural features popping a little bit more.
You can actually.
And I'm like, wow, I didn't realize it had all of those, the dental or the,
It's not bad. It's
Yeah.
not bad.
We'll see.
It's actually kind of
Open mind.
Right, exactly.
Okay, Doug, I've lost
Let it woo you.
track of where we are, but
Since
you
it's
got
too
anything you
late,
wanna
it's
add
hard
to it?
Well, I
find an
just,
area, let's
I don't know
just
how
leave that.
unusual exactly the neon signs are. If I understand it
Anymore,
right,
they're
there
quite
isn't another thing
unusual.
like it in the United States,
There is one
There
other
are.
location.
or one other one.
Yeah.
But I think it could be a real draw, and I consider them to be art. And if they're placed right, I think it could be a really neat thing for us. And then I'm delighted about the hotel.
oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So just to
I can't wait.
kind of jump on that a little bit, and I'm going to go quick.
They're excited about getting going
I
on it.
know. The walking tour that, I can give you just a quick update. I am looking and talking with Inman Cemetery about potentially doing an app for the historic walking tour grant that we received. And Matthew and I have had conversations about maybe this being, obviously kind of like maybe a segue to much more. Tim's got some ideas that he's had regarding people coming to our community and having an app, but it could potentially be add-ons in the future in this walking tour. It could be a sign museum. I mean, it could be basically, this is our, and then everybody, so that's Main Street, which
Grab
is a
people off the
nonprofit.
freeway with the app GPS.
And they may be able to, so I'm not the IT gal by any means, but I'm thinking that that could then provide the level of detail, especially that Sandy was mentioning, and obviously Doug, but kind of give you a little bit more as to, this is not a Vidal sign, but this is Americana. I kind of like that idea.
Yeah,
But-
Americana.
Yeah, that is that's a
Yeah.
really good one. And that's cool that it's a Chicago-style building and it came from Chicago. I didn't even
They thought
didn't know
that
that. Yeah, I don't know, but I think that just happened, but.
It'll
So,
do.
so that'd, I think
Okay,
that'd be great.
Sandy?
Okay,
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
first of all, speaking of walking tours, Lisa and I would like to cordially invite you to meet with us in terms of how we can get this walking tour finished. We're going to apply for a grant for the paper part of it. We want to work with you in terms of getting it online.
Perfect.
And along with that, and it doesn't matter whose website it's on, because we can all link to that website. So
Okay.
we can just, the splatter effect.
Yes.
Anyway, and Chris Bolton, who is our docent at the courthouse and was one of those guys who put together the Chinese exhibit at the Discovery Center, very talented guy. Anyway, he has created a map that's on the wall at the courthouse showing, probably a dozen or more different trails in and out of the Dalles, showing very graphically that we are a hub. Everything from Oregon Trail to the Eel Trail up to Fort Simcoe and all around. Anyway, so we needed that at the courthouse. However, in order to apply for a particular grant, we needed to tie the trails in to the walking tour. So we're going to use that same map in washout, or that may not be the right term, but behind behind some other things in the brochure. And so that will be a real,
Nice.
a real good addition to that. So, no, I didn't know there was a turquoise building. Anyway, just some quick rundown on the original courthouse. Our handicapped railings, after 20 years, are all in and approved and really look good. We have worked with Dawn and with Brown Roofing, and we are in the process. The cedar shakes for a new roof have been ordered, and so that takes about 6 weeks for them to come. They're fire retardant or fire repellent or fire something or other, which is different than fireproof. And but that's what we have on the roof now. And so that's our next big project. And when Walt Erickson and crew, all those years ago, hosted bingo every Saturday night for 9 years and put the money aside for capital expenses, that is what we're spending now. It's just,
How long has Walt been
it was
gone?
so nice that, it's incredible that they had the foresight to do that. And so, anyway, I think that's probably the highlights from the courthouse. We are going to be involved in the Gray Line Saturday tours that are coming from Portland. As Lisa said, if we can get the people to come to the Dalles and not just stop in Hood River. So we have a big advertising commitment to make to get people here. And Cascade Locks is already feeling that because they go right by Cascade Locks to go to Hood River and shop and recreate. So, but last Saturday, it was just the powers that be that were going around. And it's in tonight's paper. It's not all correct in tonight's paper, but it's a start. So,
A naked lady on the building would draw them, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
yes, we could, yeah. You know, there are all sorts of possibilities. And, you know, Dennis could spearhead this for us.
Well, maybe Steve Light's building mural will actually
Yeah.
be bringing some speak at that.
I'm through.
I wish school was in session so we could get some art kids down there to watch that. So I might just blast a post out on Facebook to get people to go look.
Good.
It's really, really cool.
Dennis, you could have paint night down there.
There you go. Talk to, what's his name, Paint Night.
Oh, Tom, yeah.
Pick out a building. and start.
Get back
Oh,
on
no.
course. I see that we do have a load of wood chips dumped alongside Scenic Drive. I could not detect, and it was a real warm day, rather than it actually been placed on any trails.
So not as of yet, so that is, they did order it and it will be placed within the next couple of weeks is the plan.
I would suggest that we be very careful working at all in that Pioneer Cemetery at this time. The fire danger is so high.
Right.
That it is just takes
But it looks
nothing.
great.
Doesn't it look great?
Damn.
It does. And I will point out, and I don't know if Tim's aware of this, it is actually our maintenance crew that's doing that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the National Guard has not been involved much on that. I mean, and it could be a disconnect too, that maybe we could foster the
Now,
relationship.
The only other thing is vice. I think I'm a vice person. I really would emphasize again that we try to meet a little more regular than we have been, even if we don't do anything more than do just exactly what we've done for the last 15 minutes. Let each other know where we are and what is going on and what Dennis is finding on First Street. I don't go down First Street, so
So we have tried to do it every other meeting, or if we don't have. We had, I think we had some staffing, we were down a planner. I was out of the office, I think, for the last meeting, and I think we couldn't get a quorum. There was something that we were talking about, and we decided to not have it. So we do, if we don't have an application, we're going to try every other month at least. That's the plan. I think we were doing really good for a while, but maybe this last time was a couple months between. One
Yeah, I
extra
think, I agree with Bob that this communication between us, because we represent different organizations and groups, and we all see things, those who drive down First Street for whatever reason can share with the rest of
Wife
us.
said to drive down First.
I was going to say, because the archaeological resource told him to.
Anniversary, so it's
We could go home. If
Let's
someone
go
will
home.
make it.
Someone needs to
You've
make a
got the
move to
gavel.
adjourn.
No, I have to have a motion.
I move that we go home.
I second the motion.
Aye. Unanimously passed.
I'm seriously excited
That
about
was
that.
awesome, that was exciting. Yay.
Dawn, will you call Lisa and set up a meeting, and then you two let me know when it is, and I'll make